Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Today we discuss about regulatory framework for medical devices and in vitro diagnosis. This webinar is the third in the Atlantic Med webinar series, and it will be recorded. So you will be able to access in our web, atlantic-ketmed.eu, or our YouTube channel. So the person who explains all these matters and issues about regulatory framework will be Eduardo Garrido. Eduardo Garrido is a PhD in biomedicine with a bachelor in chemistry. And we can start now, okay?
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So, as Alicia was saying, I'm Eduardo Garrido. I work in Australia, and I've been working here for almost 3 years now. We focus a lot on both pharma products and medical devices, and today we're going to be discussing about the regulatory framework for medical devices. So, let's do an overview of what the training is going to be about. First, we're going to have like the first section where we're going to talk about general concepts of please keep them in mind, write them down, and after this first section we will have 15 minutes for questions. Then we'll have a little break. Since we're starting a little bit late, instead of 15 minutes we will do it with 5 or 10, okay, so as to be in time. And then we'll do section 2. In this section, we will talk about the milestones to CE marking, and which will lead us to the technical documentation. Okay. Then we will talk about specific points of the technical documentation. So without further ado, let's start the training. So about the general concepts, what we should first define is what is a medical device. A medical device is any instrument, apparatus, appliance, software, implant, reagent, material, or other articles which is intended for human use. This is very important. It's got to be intended for human use. Animal use is excluded. And for one or more specific medical purposes. Okay, it can be used for diagnosis, for monitoring, for treatment, for investigation, for replacement or modification of diseases, injuries, handicaps, replacement of parts of anatomies, parts of pathological processes, and also it includes control of or support of conception. Okay, it is important to keep in mind always that the mechanism of action of this device cannot be achieved through pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means. Okay, it's truly important to keep this in mind in order to qualify your device as a medical device. Okay, if the main if the main mechanism of action is pharmacological, the product will not be considered a medical device, but a medicinal product. Okay. So on the other hand, what do we have? We've got like plenty of examples that are included as medical devices. For instance, syringes, staples, implants, or even way more complicated products such as RMI machineries or any other imaging systems. They are also considered medical devices. Products that are also included as medical devices are, for instance, inhalers. And as you can see, there's a quite wide variety of types of products. All of these products are considered medical devices. So what is not considered a medical device? Well, we've got 4 typical examples, which are medicines. Obviously, as I said, if the mechanism of action is driven by pharmacological mean, then it's a medicine. It's not considered a medical device. Food supplements are also not considered medical devices. Why? Because they lack intended medical use. And we also have cosmetics, which also lack this medical use, and biocides. Within this group of medical devices, there is an interesting group we should talk about briefly because it's gonna come up later on with the changes of the regulation, which are drug device combinations. What are drug device combinations? Drug device combinations are products that include both a medicinal product and a medical device. Okay, within this group, we can split two different subcategories, which would be integral DDCs and non-integral DDCs. Integral DDCs are physically integrated. Okay, we have the medicinal product along with a medical device that are totally integrated. They cannot be separated. Okay, this would be the left column. Within this group, we would have devices that incorporate a medicine.
About medical devices,
Apologies. Sorry, we keep the question for the end of the session, please. So we've got devices incorporating a medicinal product, and then devices intended to administer medicinal products. Okay. On the other hand, we've got non-integral DDCs, which are not physically integrated. That means that they can be prepared separately, and they are combined in a certain point before administration. Okay. These medicinal products and medical devices can be co-packaged, which means that they are sold in the same unit, or the device can be separately sold from the medicinal product. Okay. Examples of integrals and non-integrals DDCs. We would have integral DDCs. The most typical example is a pre-filled syringe. Okay, you can all imagine that the medicinal product is integrated within this device. On the other hand, non-integral DDCs would be, for example, dosifiers. Okay, dosifiers are usually sold with the very same medicinal product that they're going to dosify. Okay. So now that we've talked about the drug-device combinations, let's talk about in vitro diagnostic medical devices, because this is the other one, the other partner. Okay, we've got medical devices and in vitro diagnostic medical devices. So within IVDs, we've got reagents, calibrators, control materials, specimen receptacles, related instruments, software as well, related articles or related apparatus that are used for the in vitro examination of human specimens and provide information for the diagnosis or aid in the diagnosis or screening or monitoring or predisposition or prediction or determination of certain diseases. Okay, it's important to keep in mind that this examination has to be in vitro and it cannot be performed on the patient. The moment the device comes in contact with the patient, it's not considered an in vitro device anymore. It goes to medical device per se. Okay, so it's important to keep this in mind when qualifying our product. Within the group of IVDs, we have one subgroup, one subcategory that is also important, which are companion diagnostics. Okay, so what are companion diagnostics? Companion diagnostics are IVDs that are essential for the safe and effective use of a corresponding medicinal product. Okay, what they do is they identify either before or during treatment the patients that or are most likely to benefit or are in higher risk. Okay, so they will help the user decide if this tool, this IVD, should be this treatment should be given to the patient. Okay, what it's going to be providing is information on if the treatment is going to be beneficial or it's risky for the patient. Okay, keep in mind that companion diagnostics are always associated with a specific INN. Okay, it's associated with a specific molecule. So now that we have in mind what are medical devices and what are IVDs, there are several products that are quite close to the to these two groups. Okay, we can see here some examples of borderline products, and it's important at early stages of development. It's important to identify to what kind of product you're going to be leading to. For instance, you've got to differentiate if your product is going to be a medical device or a medicinal product. Obviously, the legislation that applies to each of these kind of products is very different. So you've got to identify it early on so as to be able to know which requirements are going to be applicable to you. Okay. So it's important to be able to distinguish between these medical devices and food supplements or software or cosmetics. Obviously, software, for instance, there's plenty of software that's used with a medical intention, but it's got to be assessed if it's a medical device or not. Okay, so all this is laid down in the regulation for the medical devices. So let's enter in the topic per se. okay, which is the regulation of these medical devices and these IVDs. So first, we're going to talk about the legal framework. So what do we have to do in order to place one product in the European market? Okay, as you may be aware, what you need to do is to obtain the CE marking for your product. This process can be done with or without the involvement of a notified body. That will depend on the classification of your device. If your device has a class superior to 1, let's say class 2A, 2B, or 3, you will require the participation of a notified body to obtain the CE marking. If your device is a class 1, you can obtain the CE marking. You can place the CE marking by yourself as a manufacturer. You don't need the involvement of a notified body. Okay. You might have seen this CE logo in the packagings of medical devices. Obviously, this indicates that it's CE marked, and this little number below indicates the notified body that was involved in the certification of this product. Obviously, as a medical device in Europe, you only need one CE marking. Okay, once you are CE marked, you're allowed to place the product in all the European market. Okay. So up until now, what was the situation? Well, up until 2017, there were 2 directives for medical devices, which were Active Implantable Medical Devices Directive, number 9385. And then we also had the Medical Devices Directive, which is 93/42. Okay. On the other hand, for in vitro diagnostic devices, we had the In Vitro Diagnostic Directive 9879. But this all has changed. It started changing in 2017. Why? Because it was implemented the new regulations for medical devices and in vitro diagnostics. For medical devices, these 2 pre-existing directives were merged in a single regulation, while the directive of in vitros was transformed in the regulation for in vitros. Okay. Where are we now? I mean, this has been implemented, started to implement it since 2017, but where are we right now? Well, it was medical device regulations, MDR, was supposed to be implemented by 2020, in May 2020, but due to the COVID situation, this has been postponed for a whole year, so it will be fully implemented on May 2021. Okay. On the other hand, for IVD's regulation, there has been no delay, and no delay is expected, as obviously the market has had more time to adapt to this regulation, because it's supposed to fully apply on May 2022. So there's more room to be able to do the adaptation. However, it is not certain if it will be postponed or not. We'll have to see how the situation evolves. Up until now, no notifications have been provided indicating that this will be delayed. So with the information up to date, it's supposed to be implemented on May 2022. Okay. So why did this happen? Why was this change of legislation promoted? Well, there were several points that had to be addressed with the directive, which were fairly old, let's say. For instance, health science was evolving pretty fast, and there were devices that were falling out of the scope of the regulation. So this had to be amended. Also, with this evolution of the health science, not all the devices were covered with the classification. For instance, devices that entangled quite a lot of risk were classified as low risk devices.
Legal frameworks. Venga, genial. Pues pasemos a Ivy entonces, ¿te parece?
Sorry, there's someone with the microphone activated.
En plan, I-V-Y.
Okay, let's follow on. So besides these product-specific requirements, we also have clinical evaluation requirements, which obviously with the passing of the years, they're becoming more thorough. Obviously, there were tracking issues for the devices which were falling behind. They were being left quite old, and this is why the UD and UDAMED have been established. Also, economic operators that were not defined in the old directives. So as you see, there were many points that were not being addressed for the directives, and that's why the regulations had to be implemented to update the legal framework. Okay. One of the points that was quite assessed with this new regulation are the products without medical intention, which are described in Annex 16 of the Medical Devices Regulation. What are these products? These products are products that lack this medical intention, but nevertheless they have to comply with the Medical Devices Regulation. Okay, what does that mean? That the requirements that are applicable to the normal medical devices are also applicable to these devices, which are now considered medical devices, even though they lack this medical intention. This Annex 16 presents a list of all the products that are included within the scope of these products without medical intention, but mostly you have them here summarized, which would be like products for modifying anatomy, or contact lenses without correction of vision, subcutaneous fillers, devices for the removal or destroy of adipose tissue. As you can see, these products, they lack a medical intention. They don't have a purpose of treating or alleviating a disease or making a diagnosis, but they have to comply with the safety requirements of the regulation. So before we enter in other terms of the regulation, we should have clear certain definitions. Okay, we make here a comparison between the medical devices and the medicinal products, as you might be more familiar with one and the other, so you can see the correspondence between the medical devices and the medicinal products terminology. Okay. So here in this slide, we're going to talk about the economic operators, which is called MADER. These are the entities responsible for the processes of placing in the market of a device. Okay. So first, we've got the manufacturer. The manufacturer is that entity responsible for the CE marking of the device. This would be the equivalent to a marketing authorization holder for a medicinal product. Okay. It's important to clarify that this manufacturer does not need to produce the product per se. The manufacturer can contract another entity to produce a product, but it's the legal responsible. Okay, but it's not necessarily the entity that's producing the device. Then we also have this authorized representative. This figure is important for manufacturers which are based outside the European Union. Obviously, if you're based in the European Union, you don't need this authorized representative, as the manufacturer will be the one taking legal responsibility. And this is a figure similar to a local representative in medicinal products. We also have the importer, which is it's an entity established in the union that imports, obviously, the device from a third country outside the union market. It's also called importer in medicinal product. And we've got the distributor, which is the same figure as in medicinal products. And then the regulation has introduced this new figure, the person responsible for regulatory compliance. Okay, this figure was not there before. This has been introduced with the regulation. What does this person do? This person is responsible for compliance with the regulatory requirements as laid down in the regulations. Okay, this person needs to accumulate certain experience and has to be qualified in certain fields, as indicated in the regulation. This would be a similar figure as a qualified person in medicinal products. So besides these economic operators, there are certain terms that should be known to anybody who has to work with medical devices. For instance, the intended purpose or intended use. This is what is the device going to be used for. This is a similar definition as the indication for medicinal products. Then we have the CE marking, which is the approval process that have to comply. The devices have to comply with, and this would be an equivalent to the authorization of medicinal products. Then we've got the MedDev GATF, which are guidance documents, which are somewhat equivalent to EMA ICH. On the other hand, we've got ISO 13485, which is a quality management system. We will talk about this on the second section in more detail, but you will see that the manufacturers need to have this quality management system implemented, and it that should be based on this ISO standard. Okay, it is equivalent to the good manufacturing practices of the medicinal products. And we've got the notified bodies. The notified bodies are the entities responsible for the verification of compliance with the regulatory requirements. It's not like in medicinal products where we've got this competent authority, which can be national or it can be EMA, for instance. In this case, we've got these notified bodies. These notified bodies, what they do is they get authorized after complying with certain requirements. And then they are available to assess the conformity of devices of the manufacturers. Okay. Other terminology that is used in medical devices is clinical investigations. Okay. Usually in medicinal products, it's called clinical studies, but in medical devices, we call it clinical investigation or clinical study. And then we've got this technical documentation, which we will talk about in detail on the second section, which is all the documentation to demonstrate complying with the regulatory requirements. And it's more or less equivalent to the common technical document for medicinal products. It's not as well organized or as detailed because medicinal products have a very specified granularity and sections defined, and a technical document is still not at that level of specification, but it's getting there. And then we've got the unique device identification, which is a code to identify and trace a product, and we will talk about it later. And it's equivalent to a serialization concept for medicinal products. Okay, so now that we have clear more or less the terms we're going to use for the medical devices, let's talk about the classification of these medical devices. So what has happened with the new regulation? Well, classification was used to be performed with 18 rules that were laid down in directives, and now it's done according to 22 rules. So there have been 5 new rules that have been added in this regulation. Okay, these rules make relation to software, nanomaterial, inhalers, substance-based products, and diagnostic functions. Okay. So what are we going to do to classify a device? What we have to do is we have to really define the intended purpose of the device and have several points clear. For instance, a very important use is the duration of use. This is very important to define if your device is going to be used transiently or for short term or long term. Okay, once you're aiming to classify your device, you've got to identify which at what time you're going to be using your device, for how long. It should be noted that discontinuous use is not considered. Okay, if you use your device and then remove it and then use again, it's considered transient. It's not considered. It's not cumulative. Then you've got to consider the invasiveness of your device. Okay, devices that penetrate inside the body through a body orifice or through the surface of the body are considered invasive. Okay. If they introduce through the surface of the body, they consider surgically invasive device because they require of an intervention to get within the body. Okay. We also can consider if our device is implantable or not. Obviously, those that are intended to remain within the human body are considered implantable, and the ones that are not implantable. Okay. If the device is introduced in part, but is meant to remain in the body, it's considered implantable anyhow. And then the last concept that it's important is if your device is active or non-active. Okay, active devices require of a source of energy other than generated by the human body. Okay, non-active devices can perform without the need of these external source of energy. So once we have these 4 points clear, we aim to classify our device. What we do is we follow the rules that are laid down in Annex 8 of Medical Devices Regulation, and we see which rules are applicable to our device. Okay. Once we follow these rules, we can determine if our device is Class 1, Class 2A, 2B, or 3. Okay. We go from lower risk to higher risk. So The class 1 devices are self-certified, as we were saying before. They will not require the involvement of a notified body for the CE marking, while the others, 2A, 2B, and 3, will require of the CE marking, of a notified body for the CE marking. Okay, there are specific cases of class 1 devices, such as class 1 sterile or with measuring function, that do require of notified body activity, but only to assess particular parts of the technical documentation, such as the sterilization process of or the measuring function. If we identify several rules that apply to our device, we will use the one that leads to a higher risk classification. Okay, if you identify that, for instance, one rule classifies your device as a class 2A and another rule classifies your device as a class 3, you will classify your device as a class 3. You will not classify it with a lower class, but with a higher class. Sorry. So let's see one example, well, a couple of examples to see how this works. For instance, let's consider we've got one implant for bone regeneration, okay, which is obviously implantable. It's used for long term because it's meant to remain in the body until it's reabsorbed. And let's say it's non-active, obviously, because it doesn't require an external source of energy. And then let's say it's absorbed by the body. Okay, so we would go to the implementation rules, and we would see that according to rule 8, this device would be considered a class 3. Why? Because it has a biological effect or is mainly absorbed. Okay. On the other hand, we can see as well that, for instance, let's consider that we incorporate nanomaterials to this device. Okay, so we go to rule 19 and we see that devices that incorporate nanomaterials are considered class 3 if they present a high or medium potential for internal exposure. So all in all, if we consider these two rules, we would obtain a class 3 medical device. Okay, we can see that it doesn't change the classification. It's not up classified because both rules lead to a class 3 device. So let's see an example of a change of an up classification due to different rules. Let's imagine a wound irrigation solution, which is invasive, but obviously it goes inside the wounds. It's for transient use because it's only going to be used during surgery, and obviously it's not an active device. It's a non-active device. Okay, so according to Rule 6, this would be considered a 2A device. Okay. But let's imagine that we incorporate a medicinal product that is ancillary to the device. So according to Rule 14, this would be up classified to a class 3 device. Okay, so you've got it's quite important to do an exercise of identification of which rules are applicable to your device, and then analyze which one is the higher one, and that's the one that we're going to select. So on the other hand, let's talk now about IVDs. What happens with IVDs? This classification has changed quite a lot. I mean, it's not like in the medical devices. It has changed from one system of classification to another. So what was the classification system with the directives? There were two lists A and B in Annex 2, and if your device fell within any of these lists, it would be classified accordingly. But if not, it would be a class A device, like the lowest risk device. Right now, with the regulation, what has happened? It's a similar system to the medical devices has been implemented. Now we have 7 rules to classify the devices. Okay. So, for instance, let's see. In IVDD, we had these two lists, list A, list B, which listed certain devices. We can see here that list A included devices, in vitro diagnostic devices for the determination of blood groups or confirmation and quantification of markers for diseases such as HIV or hepatitis. On the other hand, list B includes devices for the determination of certain blood groups and determination of irregular anti-erythrocytic antibodies. Well, you can see here all the list. And if your device was within this list, it would be not considered a class A, but would be up classified. Okay. So which devices required notified body involvement? Well, those that were either in list A, list B, or if they were for self-testing. Devices that were supposed to be used by the patient were also assessed by notified bodies. Okay. What happens now? What happens with the regulation? This has changed quite a lot. We have this classification system from A to D, being class A the lowest risk and class D the higher risk. You can see here some examples. Usually class A devices have low public health risk and low personal risk. And then in class D, we've got devices that are used for diseases with high public health risk and high personal risk, such as HIV or hepatitis or syphilis. Okay. So what are we going to do? We have these 7 rules for the classification. And what we should do when we classify our IVD is follow each of these classifications to determine what kind of device we have, what kind of device we're dealing with. Okay, so what we would typically do is we go to rule 1 and we assess if the device is used for blood screening. If it's used for blood screening, okay, then your device is going to be considered a class D. If it's not, we would move on to rule 2. Then we would see if the device is used for blood or tissue compatibility. If it is used for blood or tissue compatibility, then we would classify it as class C or D, depending on the blood group. But if not, we would move on to rule 3 and so on, okay, until we finish all the classification rules. What's the paradigm with this change in the classification? Well, up until now, with a directive, it was pretty easy to obtain a device that didn't require notified body involvement. Okay. On the other hand, now with the regulations, it's going to be the other way around. You're going to need. It's quite likely that you're going to need notified body involvement, and there are going to be just a few devices that do not require notified body involvement. Okay. What is important about this issue? Okay, all these devices that were self-certified until now with IVDD will have to be classified according to the regulation, which might lead to an up classification to class B or C or D. What does it mean? That they're gonna require now the notified body involvement. Up until now, they had not been. They had not required of the involvement of a notified body, but this is something that is going to change, particularly from 2022. Okay, this is what we meant when we were talking about the market getting ready for the implementation. So this is something to take into consideration. So let's go to an example of the classification of an IVD. For example, if we had an IVD for use in breast cancer, excluding self-testing, obviously, I mean, we cannot consider this self-test point. What would happen if we followed that directive? Well, our product is not included in lists A or B of Annex 2, so the product is self-certified. Okay, there's no notified body involvement in the certification of this device. On the other hand, if we go through classification according to regulation, we'd have to follow Rule 3, and the device would be considered Class C device. So as you can see, this IVD would have to be assessed by a notified body if we follow the regulation. Okay. This would be one of the examples of IVDs that will have to go from self-certified to certified by a notified body. So as a summary for you to remember, it's okay. This will be posted on later on, so you don't have to take screenshots. You will be able to see it later on. This is a summary of the classification of medical devices. We've got from range 1 to 3. Okay, and in the case of IVDs, here I list both according to IVDD and according to IVDR. Okay, because IVDD is still in place and it's not supposed to be displaced until May 2022, so it is still applicable. So according to IVDD, we've got the non-listed, which are self-certified, and we've got the self-tests, and then those products included in lists A and B. And on the other hand, we've got the classification according to the regulation from classes A to D. Okay. So now that we've talked about the classification of the devices, let's talk about the conformity assessment. What is the conformity assessment? This conformity assessment is the pathway that has to be followed in order to obtain this CE marking. Okay. When we prepare a medical device, we need to prepare technical documentation of this device, which is going to be linked to the quality management system of the manufacturer, and this will yield a CE marking. Okay. This process involves notified bodies, which, as we said, will assess devices from class 2A to 3. But it will also involve expert panels or medicinal product competent authorities. Okay. Why? Because there are medical devices that, for instance, incorporate ancillary substances. There are these particular IVDs we were talking about before, that are companion diagnostics that require of the action of a medicinal product competent authority. Okay. So this conformity assessment, how is it going to be performed? How are we going to do it? First, we've got to draw up this technical documentation. We will talk about here you have like a general example of the technical documentation, but we will talk in detail in section 2. And what does this technical documentation include? Well, all the information of the manufacturer, how the device was designed, how is it manufactured, the general safety and performance requirements, the risk management. There are a lot of points that have to be assessed in this technical documentation, and this is tightly linked to the quality management system of the manufacturer. As we were saying before, the manufacturer has to have a quality management system in place in order to produce a device. Okay, this quality management system shall be based on ISO 13845, 85, sorry, which is specific for medical devices. And this quality management system will include standard operation procedures that will describe all the points of the technical documentation, such as how are we going to prepare the risk management, how are we going to assess the design of the devices, how is the device going to be controlled once it's placed on the market, such as post-market surveillance. Okay. So regarding the conformity assessment routes, we've got three different pathways. Okay, we've got Annex 9, 10, and 11 of both medical device regulation and in vitro diagnostic regulations, which specify consulted for the authorization of this kind of product. Okay. So now that we know how to obtain a device and how to get to place it on the market, let's talk about a few topics that have been brought up by the regulation, by the new regulation. First, we're going to talk about Article 117. This article is applicable to the drug device combinations we mentioned before. If you remember, we had integral combination and non-integral combination. Okay. This article is applicable only to those which are integral DDCs. Okay, non-integral DDCs are not affected by this article. Okay, which drug device combinations are going to be affected? Well, those that incorporate a medicinal product, and obviously the medicinal product is principal. The mechanism of action is principal, and also devices that are that are exclusively designed to administer medicinal products. Okay, which conditions should be fulfilled so that this article is applicable to the device? Well, they have to be an integral combination, they have to be exclusive use in the given combination, and it cannot be a reusable device. Okay, here we have some examples of devices that fall within the applicability of this article, which would be, for example, inhalers or pre-filled syringes or transdermal patches. Okay, all these kind of devices have to undergo, have to fulfill with this article. So what does this article say? This article, what is new, what is being incorporated in the regulation is that if your device, which is higher to class 1, does not have a certificate of conformity, you need to provide with a notified body opinion. Okay, what does that mean? Up until now, you could either manufacture the device in-house without presenting this CE marking, or you can buy it externally. So what what is being brought up now is that, okay, if you don't buy a already CE marked product, if you don't use a CE marked product, you have to provide with a notified body opinion assessing that this device complies with the regulation. Okay. So what it means here is, if you go to the end of this slide, you see right before the marketing authorization, it's that if your device does not have a CE marking in place, for instance, you manufacture a pre-filled syringe, but you are not a syringe manufacturer, so you have never marked your syringe. Okay, what the regulation is saying is, okay, you can have a device that is not CE marked, but it has to be assessed by a notified body nevertheless. Okay, so you have to send data on your device to a notified body who will assess if your device complies or not with requirements of the regulation. Once this notified body assesses if it complies or not, the marketing authorization will be granted or not. Okay. So this report, this notified body opinion, as we said, is a report that has to be in place when the device has not a CE marking. Okay. This report, what will require to be done, what you will have to send to the notified body is the list of the applicable general safety and performance requirements applicable to your device, the methods to demonstrate compliance with these requirements, and then you also have to send the harmonized standards or common specification or references that you are going to use to demonstrate compliance. Okay, and then you will receive back a report. Okay, in this report, the notified body will with their opinion regarding the conformity of the device. Okay, the notified body is going to assess if the device complies or not with the regulation. Okay, this report is also going to list which version of the device has been evaluated, and it's also going to have all the information for the competent authority on what data has been assessed. Okay, and then any gaps that will have to be analyzed by the competent authority will be laid down in this report. Okay. So how is this notified body opinion procedure work? How is this obtained? So first, you've got to provide a technical documentation of the device to the notified body. This notified body will perform a technical assessment of this documentation you have sent, and they might ask back for more information if it's not there. And then the process will enter a questions and responses cycle. Okay, which means that the notified body may go asking clarification on certain points, and the manufacturer will have to provide with all the answers to the questions of the notified body. Okay, this is an iterative process, so it can happen many times. It will be limited to the will of the notified body. And once all these questions have been closed out, the notified body will emit a certificate decision. In this certificate decision, they will indicate if the device complies or not with the regulation. Okay. This will be all written down in a summary report, which will be issued to the manufacturer. It's important to take into account, if you're a marketing authorization holder, if you want to sell a medicinal product and your product is an integrally combined DDC, you have to keep in mind that this process is going to take around 2 to 6 months. Okay, so it's something that should not be, it's not a minor thing. It's got to be done in a fair long time. But this time is going to be variable depending quite a lot on the documentation status when it is provided. If you provide with quite complete documentation with all the points to be assessed within the documentation you're sending, such as a thorough GSPR checklist, and all the applicable standards have been identified, and all the methods for you to validate your device are all included there, it's it's more likely that the procedure is going to take shorter than if you don't take this into account when doing the initial submission. Okay, obviously the timing will also vary depending on how fast the manufacturer replies to the questions of the notified body. Obviously, the faster the manufacturer replies, the faster the process is going to be. And last, this timing will also vary depending on the selected notified body. Please take into account that when you're assessing or certifying a device, you can select a notified body from within all the those that have been pre-designed. Okay, this you can see in the NANDO database, which notified bodies are assessing devices depending on the kind of product. So once you identify which would be suitable for your kind of product, you can select between the possibilities. But obviously, there are certain notified bodies that can work faster due to their pipelines or efficiency than others. Okay. So besides this notified body opinion, what impact does this article have? Well, this article, what it's saying is that there's a lot of information of the device that has to be placed on the common technical dossier of the medicinal product. Okay, if you're familiar with the structure of a CTD, you have several modules, so you've got to include information of the device in these sections listed here in module 1, in 3.2b, in 3.2r, and in module 5. Okay, so there's quite a lot of information that has to be available in the common technical dossier. Okay, it's not like up until now where the information was relegated to the certificate within 3.2r. Now you've got to place it within the CTD. There's a draft guideline for this point, but as I said, it's a draft. It has not been accepted yet, but it indicates which information should be included in each of the sections. So if you have to work with EDCs, I highly recommend to go visit this EMA guideline regarding the information to provide with the CTD. And besides that, it's important to take into account that even though if there are changes in the product, you won't always need a new notified body opinion. Let's say if there are changes in your medicinal product, if they don't have an impact on your medical device, then you don't have to present a new certificate or a new opinion. Okay, but if a new device is being added, obviously you need to provide with a new certificate or with a declaration of conformity or with a notified body opinion. Okay. Also, when there are changes that affect this integrally combined device, you also have to provide with a new certificate or with a new notified body opinion. Okay. It's important to clarify that there's no grandfathering. All the drug device combinations dossiers, including those from before May 2021, shall be subject to meeting this article. Okay, which means that if you're now including a new device after May 2021, obviously, if you're now including a new format of device, you will have to provide with a notified body opinion or with a certificate. Okay, even though your product was authorized way before 2021. So another point to take into account that's been brought up with the medical devices regulation, it's UDEMET and UDI. Okay, so what is UDEMET? UDEMET is expected to be a database that will be used for several points. Let's say, for instance, you will have to register your device or the economic operators, the ones we mentioned before, like the manufacturer, the importer, the distributor. These will have to be registered within this database. Okay. Then certificates will have to be issued here in this database. Vigilance activities will be performed, obviously, within this database, and notifications will be received here. Incidents will have to be notified here. Clinical investigations information will be available here as well in UDEMET. You will be able to see the sponsor, which is the status of this clinical investigation. Let's remember that clinical investigation is equivalent to clinical trials in medicinal products. Okay. And you will also be able to perform market surveillance here. Okay, in the Udemy you will see the measures taken by the member states and preventive health measures actions and which devices have been defined as non-compliant with the regulation. Everything should be seen here in Udemy. This was described in the regulation in the initial point when the regulation was released in 2017, but it has been delayed to 2022. It's not going to be active until 2022. Okay. This is going to be very, very linked to UDI. So what is UDI? UDI is a system that will allow to trace and track the devices. Okay, it's a code that includes all the information of the device. You can see here an example of a UDI, and you can see that it has two sections. It has the UDDI and the UDPI, but besides that, you've got the basic UDDI. Okay, so the UDDI will help to identify the device. Okay, it's device related. It's not associated with manufacturing processes. On the other hand, we've got UDPI. These UDPI are going to be numbers that are going to be associated to the manufacturing process. Okay, we've got expiration date or lot numbers or serial numbers. Okay, and this is going to be printed in the packaging of the device. Okay, and it's mandatory to include this information for your medical devices. These will be used to track down all the device, like all its life cycle, like from the manufacturing to if it's imported or distributed, or who is the end buyer, and this will allow to link all this information of the device to Udemy. Okay, so it's mandatory to have this printed on your device. It's also important to take into account that the basic UDDI has to be included. Okay, so this basic UDDI is a code that it's going to be used to identify a device model. Okay, this basic UDI has to be already in the technical documentation. Okay, from 2021 now, it will be mandatory to have this basic UDDI. Even though Udemy is not active, you will need to have this basic UDDI on the technical documentation to be able to quickly identify your device. Okay. As we were saying, it's got to be assigned before placing a device into the market. And you have to show it both on the declaration of conformity and in the CE certificate. Okay, we will see later that in the technical documentation, you need to draw up this declaration of conformity and you have to have this CE certificate. Well, this basic UDDI has to be there. Okay, it's got to be easy to identify the device. And obviously, as we were saying, it's got to be provided to the UDI database, okay, integrated in Udemy. So that's going to be up until now with the first section, because section 2 is going to be a bit more longer. We're going to do the questions now for this section, and then we will do a short break and keep on with the second section. You can write down the questions in the right side of the screen. You should be able to see a panel with questions. You should be able to write them down there. We will wait 5 minutes to see if you've got any questions, and if not, we will do the break and move on to the second section.
Okay, any questions? Okay, is there no question at the moment? So we have a break about
Okay. We can have a break of 10 minutes if it suits you, and we meet at 12:17 exactly. which is in 10 minutes right from now. And we move on to section 2. If you come up with any questions later on, like during second section, like you remember about the questions, you can do it on section 2. It's okay. And if you happen to remember even later on, like this afternoon or tomorrow, like some question pops your mind, you've got my email in the beginning of the presentation, so you can
Sorry,
write to me.
Eduardo. May
Yes.
I just, sorry, I was trying to write the question here in the question panel, but I'm not sure how to be able to write there. So I think other people have to see the same, and they are writing in the chat window instead. Can we write our questions there instead?
Yeah, well, since I can hear, I said writing down just in case, because there's some people I cannot hear.
Okay.
But you can, I mean, as we can all hear you, you can proceed with your question. It's okay.
Yeah, sorry about this. I just didn't know how to interrupt. We were being sent to the break. Okay, so it's just a very small question about CDX. I was wondering, the CDX examples that I know of, the medical product or the drug that is given, it's only actually given according to the results of the IVD test. And I was wondering if that is necessarily that way. I mean, obviously the result of the IVD test is going to be directly linked to the decision on whether or not you're giving the drug to the patient. But can the drug be given even if no, let's say, if no CDS test is done? I'm
Well,
not sure if I'm making myself clear.
if there's a companion diagnostic associated, it's usually used. It's usually followed, because I mean there has been a competent authority assessing that this test gives a good feedback on if there's going to be a benefit or not on the device. So most likely you've got to follow the result of the testing.
Okay, so let me just contextualize a little bit. So there are some drugs that exist nowadays that are given without any companion diagnostic test. So
Yes.
just following, just some diagnostic tests that are not specifically approved as CDX. And so if eventually a new IVD test would be approved as CDX, that let's say drug prescription would have to be changed. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think it's going to be mandatory. Like like the doctor is not going to be obliged to go and do the testing to prescribe this drug, but it's obviously going to be highly recommended, because it's going to be assessed that this testing provides a good indication whether the treatment is going to be beneficial or it's more risky to the patient.
Right.
So I wouldn't say mandatory, because no, I wouldn't say mandatory, but I would say highly recommended.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I don't have a question, but I'm just letting you know that a lot of people have typed questions, but I don't know if you can see them.
No, I don't seem to see them. I mean, okay. Sorry, yeah, I was checking the question bullet mark, but I can see here in the chat that there are questions. Okay. Let me check for a moment, and I'll be replying your questions. Just a second. I'm going through the text. Okay. A moment there. So I know. Sorry, because I see that there are plenty of points at assessing the audio of the session. I'm sorry about it. Just a moment. So I see a question here saying if it's UD, it's going to be applicable for IVDs as well. Yes, it's applicable to IVDs as well. So I see another question here. Medical devices using off-the-shelf components already certified. Is it required that the medical device integrating such component is tested, or it is not required since the component is already certified? Let's see. Well, when you say here, sorry, I cannot see the person that has asked this question. Could you clarify when you say using off-the-shelf components already certified? Uh, what do you mean here? Because you say like it's required that the medical device integrating such component is tested. Yes, in principle, it's going to have to be tested, even though if the component is already certified. Yes. I mean, it doesn't mean that I guess you're asking that for the testing of ancillary medicinal substances. Can you clarify, please?
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
So my question is related with, for example, medical devices that are composed by different components or modules.
Yes.
If one of these components is an off-the-shelf medical device that is already classified, I'd like to know if I will need to test the integrated system and obtain evidences on safety and performance.
Yeah, okay. You mean like you have certified the parts separately but not integratedly.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, correct. Yes, you have to assess the combination. Actually, it's a requirement of the regulation, which indicates that you've got to demonstrate compatibility within all the parts of your device. Yeah, if they are composed of several sections, you have to demonstrate a compatibility. Obviously, if one of your parts has already been assessed, you won't have to go as thorough with that part, but you have to demonstrate that it's compatible with the other parts.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. UD is applied also to software. Yes, it's also applied to software medical device. All this the software that is considered medical device has to have a UD. Okay. Software can be either medical device or in vitro diagnostics. It's got to be defined depending on its use. But nevertheless, UD is applicable both to medical devices and IVDs. So yeah, answering your question, if your device is a software medical device, you need to have a UDI. So I see another question here saying, for medical devices composed by different modules or components, medical devices should be tested and certified as integrated systems, or the individual module components can be tested and certified separately. Certified separately, yes, you can certify depending on your approach. You can either test together or separate it. But as I was saying in the question before, you have to demonstrate compatibility within the system. Okay, it's important to demonstrate that the system can work when it's together, when it's assembled. It's not the same as certifying the individual parts. Okay. Obviously, if you test several parts by separated, then you don't have to repeat everything with your assembled device. But obviously, you have to demonstrate compatibility. So for medical devices of class 2, A or B, pre-market certification is required. Safety and performance evidences or only safety evidences. And then in the post-market certification, the performance must be assessed and demonstrated. That's an important question. All the devices, A or B, or 3 for the matter, need to provide information on safety and performance. Okay, you will have to prepare once you want to certify your device, once you're compiling the technical documentation, you will have to be able to prepare a clinical evaluation report in the case of medical devices, or a performance evaluation report in the case of IVDs, which we will talk about in section 2 more in detail. But in these reports, you will assess the performance of your device. Okay, and it's important to demonstrate that your device provides with more benefits than it implies risks. So before certification, yes, you will have to provide evidence both of safety and performance, not just safety. Okay. It's necessary to give information about how well is your device performing. It's not just about if it's safe or not. If it's okay, obviously it has to be safe, but it has to be effective as well. It has to be doing something. Okay, so you have to demonstrate this. It's not something you can just postpone for after post-market. You've got to do it before you send the documentation. Obviously, in this clinical evaluation report, there might be some unanswered questions because obviously the clinical investigations you can perform and the data you can generate is limited. But you can address these issues in a post-market clinical follow-up, okay, which means that after you receive this certification, you will do some extra testing or some data gathering, and you will assess this on the next clinical evaluation report or performance evaluation report, okay? However, it is one of the requirements to provide with evidence of this safety and performance before prior to certification. Okay. So I go to the next question, which say devices which are able to analyze in real-time samples in the hospital and not in labs, not invasive samples such as air samples, to help in diagnostics decision should be considered IVDR. If they don't come in contact with the patient and they analyze in vitro samples, yes, they are considered IVDs. Then regarding if it's in a hospital or in a lab, it changes a bit of the approach we're placing it on the market, depending on what the manufacturer wants to do. Because there's, I mean, if there's an association of this manufacturer to the hospital, maybe he doesn't want to certify the device, and you can go through some exemptions depending on the approach you want to follow. But yes, this would be an IVD that could be hosted in a hospital. Obviously, for an IVD, you've got to demonstrate. What you always have to keep in mind is this medical intention, and this particularly for IVDs, you have to keep in mind that it's in vitro examination of samples. As long as you comply with this, softwares that do this also are IVDs, for instance. So another question we've got: what will be the situation with the MDR with human-derived products that are not marketed as medical devices at the moment? Well, if it follows within the definition of a medical device, it will have to comply with medical device. It is true that there are certain specific requirements for products that are medical devices that include human-derived products. What is important here is to keep in mind that the mechanism of action always, and in this case, you have to certify that your device is not a medicinal product that is following the regulations for medicinal products or the regulation for advanced therapy medicinal products. Okay, because there's certain kind of device that are combined that have to follow certain kinds of the medical device regulation, but also have to comply with advanced therapy medicinal products regulation. So it's quite tricky. Once you have your device defined, for instance, if you're saying I want a new tissue, but this tissue that is going to be implanted on my patient has a scaffold that gives it support to be implanted on the patient, but this scaffold is going to be reabsorbed after a while. So what happens here? The main driving action is this tissue that you have, for instance, genetically modified, but you also have this medical device, which is the scaffold that is used as a mechanical support for your tissue. So you've got to assess which is the principal mechanism of action, and then you will have to decide if your device has, well, you will have to decide, you will have to define if your device has to follow ATMP regulation or medical device regulation. Okay, there's quite a lot of guidance in this topic, which is quite useful from EMA, which tells you what kind of product you should have depending on what kind of product you're working on. Obviously, derived human products are quite a new field, but with quite a lot of possibilities. So you've got to properly define what kind of product you're working with. Okay. So next question is, when will we start the procedure of a notified body procedure notification? And the report will work like a certificate. More or less like a certificate, yes, but it's not going to be as long. And when will it start? The sooner the better. I mean, when There are notified bodies that are already providing with this service. You should contact with the notified body of your interest and see if they are doing it or not. Because right now, obviously, there haven't been many cases, because actually there are just a few, and this is something that they are starting to do now. But yeah, you should assess. You should contact your notified body or your selected notified body and ask if they're doing this procedure already. Obviously, they should be redesignated under the regulation. Okay. And the report will work as a certificate. Yes, you will have to include it on a 3.2R section of your dossier, and it will replace the certification. I mean, usually when you use a device that it has already been certified, you place the certificate in the 3.2R. In this case, since you're working with a device that has not been certified, you place the notified body opinion. Okay. So what is the certification process for a software with a single class 2A feature and all other class 1? Well, as I said before, if there are several rules applicable to your device, you've got to take the one that is higher. So you'd go to the class 2A. That always depends, and it happens a lot with software. It depends on the claims you put to your device. Obviously, it's not the same developing a class 1 than a class 2A, because class 2A will have to go through a notified body who will assess the quality of the information you're preparing. But it depends on the claims you want to do, obviously. I mean, for instance, if you've got a software that it's just assisting in the imaging of certain sections of skin, let's say, it can be classified as a class 1. But if this software is aiming in the diagnosis, it's telling the doctor which should be the diagnosis, and it's going to go to class 2A. And it obviously depends on the illnesses you want to treat. So it really depends on the indications you want to give to your device. Okay, but yes, if several rules apply, you will have to follow the higher risk one, which would be class 2A. So you'd have to undergo the certification with a notified body. So I see another question which says, can the certification process be fully remote given current problems with the pandemic? Well, I guess that that depends on the notified body. It is true that they tend to do audits, but each notified body is working on its own terms right now, because it's quite complicated. But yeah, that depends on the notified body you contact with. Do you have any information about the UK position? Yes, about the UK position. Supposedly, the regulation published by MHRA, sorry, says it's going to be accepted CE marked products by Europe, but it's not going to be the same or the other way around. I mean, the notified bodies from United Kingdom cannot certify products that are going to be marketed in Europe. So you need a notified body based on Europe. It cannot be based on United Kingdom. And in principle, those devices marketed in United Kingdom will not be accepted in Europe. They will have to be marked here or imported. What implications does branding have on CE marking? Well, branding it's quite a different topic. On CE marking, CE marking goes prior to CE marking. So sorry, CE marking goes prior to branding, I meant. So it doesn't have an impact on what you have to provide to obtain this CE marking. I mean, the only thing you have to have clear is indications and intended use you're giving to your device, but that's something you've got to do before you start with the branding of your device. Can the notified bodies also work as consultants? Usually, no. Usually, they work as a notified body where they assess your device. What do you register a medical device to obtain UD? You've got to talk with there are two entities that give these codes. I shall not rename them. I shall not remember the name now, but I'll be able to give it to you with the slides. But yeah, it's provided by a specific company, which I don't recall the name now. Does your notified body automatically become your authorized representative? No. Careful with that. The authorized representative, it's It's a figure that it's not notified. I mean, they've got nothing to do. The authorized representative is the entity that it's going to be acting as a legal responsible for the manufacturer. When the manufacturer is outside Europe, let's say the manufacturer is from Japan or from United States, and they want to bring their product to the European market. So they need somebody that is established within the European Union that will be the authorized representative. That is not the notified body. The notified body, the only thing that will do is to assess this device and indicate if it complies or not with the regulation, but it will never act as an authorized representative. So I see another question which says, notified bodies provide advice on the certification process and according clinical investigation? No, notified bodies assess the information you provide to them. Okay, obviously they will ask for more information if it's needed. Like, let's say that you don't have enough clinical data, they will say, okay, this is not enough, you should perform more clinical testing. But they're not going to be the ones saying, you should perform the tests in this way on this other. Okay, they're doing the examination, they're not giving